Alright, so I've let my thoughts on this episode kind of marinate, and I think that Bungie has certainly hit narratively some of the best marks that it has since the final shape, which is hard to do, but this is the right place and right time to do it. It's kind of a necessity. You can't really mess up Oryx and Zivu and Savathun. And yes, I know the SAG-AFTRA strike does kind of dampen the experience of the story without getting into spoilers. Of course, this will be a spoiler review of Act 1. It does dampen the experience, and I doubt that by the time this episode is concluded and Frontiers is out and all the content is gone anyways, I doubt that voice lines will be added in, but who knows. So that definitely is something to think about, but at least Bungie didn't go the route of having an AI voice in there or, hiring a scab, which would be 10 times worse than that. And honestly, you might have caught me not playing this season at all because that's completely abhorrent and messed up, although I probably still would have played just to tell you how horrible it was. But yeah, that was definitely a good thing that Bungie did, not going that route and waiting for those agreements to go through so they can either add in some voice lines at some point or, rehire those actresses down the line. That way they can still include them because, listen, Zivu's voice actress did such a good job in The Deep, and even though you never saw her character, the voice lines and the little collectibles and memories and whatnot in the dungeon specifically pulled you in, and there are very few voice actors and actresses that are capable of doing that, and especially at a high level at least. So from a story perspective, it's not the best it could be, but the lore and the consequences of what eventually happens this season are very exciting, and that's why you want to play, because you have something to look forward to. There's mysteries to unravel, and although I think the biggest mystery, so to speak, was revealed in the launch trailer and the stream reveal, I do think they could have maybe held back on the Oryx thing, and that might have been more of a surprise thing, but this is a marketing thing to get people to come back. If you enjoyed The Taken King, you might be more inclined to come back because Oryx has returned in some capacity. Again, I'm not going to spoil what capacity that is. I mean, it's kind of obvious because the key art has him peering over the dreadnought, so it's kind of hard to miss. But yeah, that I think could have been handled differently, but there's still so much mystery involved with this episode that you can afford to divulge one or two at the beginning. That way, you pull someone in, and maybe they stick around for the rest. I do think something that has suffered, and this is a very solid Destiny thing that happens throughout seasons and episodes, is the pacing just feels off. I will use last episode as a point of reference because I don't want to spoil anything, but we basically started off at 100 with us chasing down Fikrul and him crashing a ship into the helm to make it crash. And essentially nothing as climactic happened in that episode until the end. So it's kind of like you start the roller coaster at the peak and you go down and you keep going down and down and down, and then at the end there's just one more big hump and that's it. So there's 2 points at which the story felt like, oh, this is interesting, and the rest of it was just kind of boring and mundane. But I don't think this episode is quite that bad. We did start at 100. I do think there are some interesting themes that do keep the story interesting, but we'll have to see throughout the next couple of acts if that remains the case, because that's where you need to have at least something to get people to come back. Otherwise, everyone's just going to say, fuck it, I'm going to wait till the end of the entire episode, and then I'll come back to play it in one whole burst. Whereas if you have something interesting in each act that people are raving about, then people will feel more inclined to go and do that, because FOMO is such a vicious thing that Destiny does to you, and it's like crack, but not really. That's usually what I recommend to people, is if you really are teetering on whether or not you should come back, just wait to the end of the episode. There's really no reason not to, unless you're someone like me who makes videos on this stuff. Then you don't really need to to be up to date with everything. Not to mention, it's a much better way to experience the story, so you get it all in one go, as opposed to getting it fragmented. And time gating is something that is very prevalent this episode. So yeah, I'm glad we have that back, Bungie. That was a great idea. But it's nice to have these elements. It is. It's nice to have the mystery back. And one last critique on the story, because this does really, really annoy me. We have a lot of important moments that happen in lore tabs. And I'm so thankful for lore tabs, because it's fun to go and read about a character that you might have engaged in combat who otherwise is just, you know, a boss in a lost sector or a boss in a mission that you otherwise wouldn't really care about. Kelgaroth is a great example of this. He's a character that's, you know, been in Destiny since I think it was season of the Seraph, and he's even on the Pale Heart. You can go kill him again in the Pale Heart. In fact, he's called like Vestige of Failure because he's failed so many times to kill us, right? He was a Dark Blade, he was a Light Blade dude, I think, or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking of Alakul, but anyways, cool little character threads that you can follow through either lore tabs or in-game. But there's a lot of stuff that happens in lore tabs that you never see in-game. A lot of it can be like stuff with the hidden, or something that's going on with Eris and the Drifter that happens before this season that's really important context on what's going on with the Hive Echo this episode that I'm sure not many people know about. I'll leave that for people to go find themselves, or if you want to just go watch My Name is Bife's most recent video, you can do that. But, you know, someone who's new to the community maybe doesn't know about Bife yet. They might not know where to go for the lore tabs. They might not know who any of these characters are on a surface level. And there isn't going to be that impact when stuff on screen happens. And that's a very bad thing. I'm not sure what the solution is to this, but all I can say is hiding important moments in context in lore tabs. Not necessarily hiding, I mean, at least it's in game, right? But, you know, having that stuff in lore tabs instead of having it introduced in a meaningful way throughout gameplay is a little diminishing to those moments. You know, having or seeing something happen and then reading a lore tab and being like, oh, that's why the Echo was there, or the Echo wasn't there, or whatever. It's pretty important, right? So hopefully that's something they can address in Frontiers or somewhere down the line, but that's the last criticism I have on the story so far. So let's get to the first seasonal activity in episode Heresy, which is the Nether. Now, I think this is a very cool concept. It's a roguelite experience, and this really feels like Diet Pale Heart, which is a good thing. I think Pale Heart is probably the best patrol experience that you can have in Destiny. You know, you have this activity that happens, you have collectibles, you have lots and lots of loot, and you can farm one of the best items in the game in the exotic class items. The nice thing about the Pale Heart, though, which I do dislike about the Nether, is that you can just roam around, run to wherever you want. I mean, it's classic Destiny patrol. You can go into the nooks and crannies of certain areas, whereas with the Nether, you are locked into one area per encounter, and it feels not very explore-like. It doesn't feel great. And they have an explore mode that's essentially the same thing as the regular Nether. Just, you know, no pressure test. It's not quite as hard, which I guess is where the explore comes from. It would be nice to be able to just run in between areas and find secrets, which is what a lot of people like to do. And also, it kind of defeats the purpose of having an explore mode if, again, you are locked into a certain area. This hopefully is something that will be changed in the future, but I do like this activity. I like having to build into healing a little bit more, being conscious of your health bar much more often than you would be in a normal activity, as well as rationing your resources or building into making sure you can spawn more ammo if you need to. It's a cool concept, and I can't wait to see it on a larger scale, like whatever the destination is for Frontiers, having a similar experience or something along those lines. I think would be a really cool thing to have. I was hoping this would be more like Coil. I think the ramp up is really, really fast, and it doesn't feel quite as rewarding. It kind of just feels like it goes from 0 to 100 really fast, and I don't mind that necessarily, but I think the gradual incline you see in the Coil is a much more natural thing, because it doesn't go from, oh, I don't really care about being in the middle of all these ads and getting blasted. Then when you're on the third wave of the Nether, it's literally you look at something and you're gonna die, right? Like the ramp up is too fast, and you go from chilling to you're gonna die. And an expert, at least, this is mostly what I'm talking about. But I do think the base concept, building into your builds with the minor and major boons, again, really cool idea. And I can't wait to see it on a larger scale. This definitely just does leave me wanting more of the activity, different areas to experience it in, different enemies to fight, because it does get super repetitive really fast because there's not much variation. Something that was, again, cool about the Coil. I love the Coil, and it did a lot of things right. The bosses would rotate on a weekly basis. So you would have a different boss every week you went in and did that activity, and a different arena. So you would essentially be doing the same activity, but in different ways each week, which was cool. Of course, there were bosses that you hated in that activity too, that you just lamented doing in the first place, but at least it was different, and you had to do a different strategy. You could use different loadouts, whereas for the Nether, you can just slap on the same thing, and you know what the boss is, and it, again, you get burnt out on it really fast, even if you play it more casually. But it is nice that there's more stuff unlocking as the act has gone along. It just doesn't feel like enough yet, and again, I can't wait for more. The weapons, for the most part, are okay, mostly because there's really only 3 that I would recommend getting right now. The first one is, of course, Adamantite, which is just a solid weapon support frame that you can shoot your allies with and have this severing burst and more support autos. It's nice to see more of this, and I just love all the new archetypes we've gotten recently with the aerial denial frames, which, speaking of that, we do have Psycho Pump as well, which can help you build into Bolt Charge with Rolling Storm, which is just a fantastic perk, and Bolt Charge is super strong this season, so definitely go pick up one of those. And of course, the machine gun as well, which is called Watchful Eye, can also build into Bolt Charge with Rolling Storm. It's basically like Baby Thunderlord, and it's ridiculously good, so definitely go pick up one of those. You could do an Overflow Rolling Storm on that. Jolting Feedback is also really fun on Watchful Eye as well. So definitely get one of those. The other weapons, being the Linear Fusion, is kind of just not good. Of course, Linears and Fusion Rifles themselves are really good this season with Particle Recon, but there are better Linears out there than this one, in my opinion. Maybe you have a different one, whatever, that's fine. If you enjoy it, I'm not going to yuck your yum, but I just don't care about it. And then, of course, there are going to be more seasonal weapons that will drop eventually, although there was a bug in which you could get some of those weapons early. I do have a bow. I don't remember what it's called. But, you know, we'll get more seasonal weapons sooner rather than later, which is cool, I guess. But yeah, this is a common theme with seasonal weapons. You're always going to have, like, a few that are really, really good, and you have to get them. And then the rest are just like, whatever, cool, I don't care. As for everything else in this episode, I really did enjoy the Sundered Doctrine dungeon, and I can't wait to go solo flawless it. Dungeons have very easily become some of the best content in Destiny, with raids essentially being once a year now, and seemingly we're getting at least 2, maybe even 3 sometimes, in terms of dungeons, which is amazing. And they're all really good. Vesper's Host is probably my favorite dungeon now. I just conquered that dungeon with solo flawless. Let me know if you guys want to see my full clear of that. It was a pretty long clear, but anyways, aside from Vespers, I do think Sundered is up there as far as dungeons go. Of course, there was a day 1 bug that is yet to be resolved, just like we saw with Raniacs and Vespers, which that bug has kind of made that boss a lot harder, and some of the unique strategies that you could use on Raniacs don't work anymore, which does kind of suck. And there are plenty of unique strategies for this boss as well that are seemingly going to change when this bug does get fixed. It's a crit bug, so a lot of stuff that does high base damage like Wormy, Grand Overture, Sleeper, Anarchy are doing insanely well against the Zoetic lock set in Sundered Doctrine. But once this bug is fixed, you'll probably see Whisper Shine, Still Hunt, any legendary linear like Cataclysmic or Doomed Petitioner, Darcy with its rework, and a bunch of legendary snipers would work. I think plenty of other options too, like Leviathan's Breath, maybe even Izanagi's, although Izanagi's just isn't as good as it used to be. So yeah, it does kind of suck that it's the expectation of any dungeon release to have some kind of major bug that changes the way an encounter works and isn't fixed for months on end. It's still a great dungeon, don't get me wrong, but I would just love to have these encounters released as they are intended. That way, when you're making a guide for this or you're talking strategy, it's not going to change on the flip of a coin once the bug is fixed, whenever that is. Sure, we've gotten communication that it's going to be fixed, but we just don't know when. So all the builds and all the videos that are put out are going to be completely obsolete once this change comes through. So it is a little annoying from that perspective, but still everything else in the dungeon is amazing. The lore and whatnot, I'll try not to spoil too much on that particular portion of it because the quest just got completed because yeah, it's time gated. That is probably the biggest critique I can have of this episode so far, is that the time gating just needs to stop. I get that we need to have a reason for players to come back each and every week, and I think you've pretty much done that with returning to the weekly story, and you should let the story drive the engagement up, because if it's good, then people will come back to see what's going on, so they don't get spoiled, and so on. And time gating certain things like GMs, which is something that has always happened, right? I'm not super upset about that because there's a dungeon and the new activity and all that. There's plenty of stuff to do in the interim, right? But we do have to wait for Palindrome to come out, which isn't, you know, the worst thing in the world. There's just a lot of stuff you have to wait for, and you mix it all together, and everyone's gonna get mad. Like, mad at the dungeon quest, mad at certain exotic quests like the Barrow Dyad. It's a compound effect where if you didn't have those two time gates specifically, people wouldn't be as upset as they are right now, and you know, it makes sense. So yeah, I do think outside of the dungeon and the new activity and the story, Trials got revamped and it's extremely fun right now. I have even some people in my clan that are purely PvE players that are considering going in, just because it does seem to be healthier at this point in terms of player count, which is nice. And there is certainly a more casual experience you can go through if you don't want that sweatiness. But, you know, splitting the player base, I definitely think is not the greatest idea. We've seen that experiment fail time and time again. And of course, all the momentum that was built up in week 1 is going to be kind of destroyed with Iron Banner, but I'm sure with how fun it was that it won't matter anyways, which leads me back to my point that if something is good, people are going to come back anyways, right? If they enjoyed playing Trials or they enjoy the story or whatever it may be, they're going to come back. You don't have to time gate it and essentially force them into waiting a week to do something. But you have to, there are guides out there that tell people keep a boss checkpoint, because you have to complete the dungeon once after you've put a code in to collect some worms, and then you have to go back to the start of the dungeon, put in a new code, collect some more worms or kill some shriekers and dunk some knowledge, and then go back and complete the dungeon again. This quest is not account wide, so you can't do it on other characters. You're basically stuck on one character to complete this quest, which makes you do the dungeon again multiple times a week on that one character. Which, thank goodness, it's new, so it's farmable, you're not missing much loot-wise, but it is annoying if you want to switch up, you know, what character you're doing it on. And, you know, seeing as though you're gonna have to do it 2 times the next week as well, you can see how this forced completion of the dungeon can get a little annoying, I guess. And you're probably thinking, well, you like the dungeon, so why are you complaining so much about having to do it again and again? And it's more so just the way the system works, right? Having to do it back to back isn't what you always want to do, right? But if you want to just get the quest done, it's what you have to do. So, are you missing much if you don't play Heresy right away? In terms of story, I would say yes. But with the way these episodes are structured, I think anything of substance that's going to happen won't be until the end, which is why, again, like I said earlier, if you are teetering on coming back or not coming back, you don't have to for the story alone, because that will all be concluded in months from now. So don't worry about that. If you are someone who enjoys trials, or you like dungeon experiences, or maybe you enjoy roguelike experiences as well, then I would definitely consider coming back and experiencing some of this stuff before it goes away. Well, at least the trials changes will stay the same, and some other stuff will stay the same, but the nether and a bunch of the story stuff will be gone once Frontiers comes out. So yeah, if you haven't paid for this yet, I would honestly wait until the full episode is out before you spend any money on this. It's an okay experience, but this is just 1/3 of the experience so far. I will do an Act 2 review once that is out, and then I will do a full review of Heresy as well once that is released. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We have about 20 days until Act 2 comes out. I'm sure there'll be a little bit of quest stuff in between now and then with the episode, but nothing major, so to speak. But yeah, thanks for watching if you did. This far into the video, let me know what builds, whatnot you're using in episode Heresy, and I'll see you in the next one.